painting hands is tough, but I promise you it will be less tough by the end of this video. Hi, welcome to Paint Coach. I'm Chris Fornatero, here to help simplify oil painting so you can get better faster. As always, please, if you like this video, if you like this channel, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. If this short video isn't enough, if you want full real-time painting video tutorials, I offer those on my Patreon page, which you can find a link for in the description below. So for some people, painting hands is like the hardest thing to paint. What do you think the hardest thing to paint is? Let me know in the comments section. Faces? Is it landscapes? Is it hand? Flowers? Glass? Metal? Hair? Dogs? What is it? Comment below. All right, so in this demonstration, I'm going to talk about how I first draw in the hand and then breaking the hand down into simple shapes, distinguishing values, identifying color, and handling detail. So today I'm painting on an oil primed linen panel. My colors are ivory black, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, cadmium lemon, and titanium white. I'm using Gamsol paint thinner, and my medium is linseed oil. Let's start with drawing, because you got to draw the hands before you paint them, right? Now, full disclaimer, I've never studied anatomy of the hands. Like, I didn't take a class where you learn about the different muscles and tendons and all that stuff. So what I'm about to talk about is just kind of like my dumbed down version of anatomy. I'm going to start out by drawing out my hand with a wash of burnt sienna. That's burnt sienna with a whole lot of paint thinner. It's almost going to be like watercolor. It's going to be really thin, it's going to dry really quick, and this is what I'm going to use to sketch in my hand. Now the key to drawing hands is not to get caught up in drawing the individual fingers. I like to try to see the hand as a series of flat paddles. You can see with my drawing I have one paddle which is like the top of the hand, and then it bends at the knuckles, the next paddle, and then again once more at the smaller knuckles. And yes, in this reference my fingers are together, so it makes it easier to do this paddle thing, but it's still true even if your fingers are spread out. And you can see I use one line to mark off where the ends of the fingers are. But then I'll go back in and define a little clearer exactly where each finger starts and stops. Now I do the same process with the other hand, but I actually indicate the fingers a little bit more because I want to make sure that I got the right width for this hand. I was having trouble figuring out the exact width of the hand, and kind of just indicating the fingers and where they'd be helped me figure that out. And now I'm done drawing. You can see it's very basic. There's no detail, but the main structure and form of the hands are there. So the first thing I'm gonna do is indicate the darkest areas in the painting. This is going to help me gauge values later on. If I know where the darkest area is and I get that right, it's pretty easy to get the value of the darkest area on the painting. So once you have that, you can use that as a reference to gauge the values throughout the painting. And with hands, value is very important. Pretty much like anything else. I'm going to move on to blocking in the painting with thin paint. And this is paint thinned out with paint thinner. I'm going to start with my darker sections and then to the lighter sections. And keeping the paint thin is going to allow me to push the paint around and move it to where I want it to be. My goal here is to cover all of the canvas with paint. I'm not really concerned with nailing the right color or even nailing the right value at this point. I just want to be in the ballpark so I can start to get a sense of what's going on. A common mistake people make is they try and nail it right off the bat. They try and get the right color and the right value and the right thickness of paint right from the get-go. And I like to build up to that. I like to kind of carve the painting out as I go. I'm also painting / drawing in straight lines. You're not going to see a lot of curved brush strokes. I like doing this because I find it more helpful to define the correct structure of the hand. It makes things very clear, like what the angles of something is or what the shape of something is when you're using straight lines. There'll be time to round and smooth everything out later. Think of it kind of like building a house, and then you need this sturdy, straight, rigid structure to build the house on top of. I'm also getting my background in earlier because that's gonna help me do many things. That's gonna help me gauge the values of the hand. It's also gonna help me construct and carve out the outside of the hand, like the edges and the outline. And again, with this background color, I'm not worrying about getting the exact right color, just something in the ballpark. I'm keeping the paint thin with paint thinner and moving it around. Now I'm doing what I like to call carving out the painting. My paint is still relatively thin, but I'm starting to define the individual fingers slowly. You won't see me going in there with a small tiny brush and outlining exactly where the fingers are. I like to sneak up on it, carve them out of the paint. A thing I like to do is that when I mix up a color for a certain area and paint that area, I look to other areas of the subject to see if I could use that color elsewhere. This helps you build the painting up as a whole instead of trying to figure out and completely paint like one individual finger to completion, then move on to the next finger and the next finger. This will help you build the painting as a whole, which I highly suggest. I'm still painting with a big brush and making big marks, but I'm being very mindful of those marks. All right, let's talk about the shape of the fingers. I talked about this a little bit with the hand in general in terms of the whole paddle thing. I do a similar thing with the fingers. Like the general shape I think of them as is like French fries, like long boxy rectangles. I know fingers are cylinder shaped, but at these beginning stages, I want to be this simplified and this clear as to the planes and the shapes of the fingers and how the light's hitting them. There'll be time later on to develop them and smooth them out into cylinders. All right, so once you reach about this stage, I feel like you've done the most important work with the painting. Your hands are looking like hands, your fingers are looking the right size, the shape and form of everything is becoming clear, the value comparisons are correct. Now it's just a matter of repeating this process of seeing the shapes, but getting smaller and smaller with your shapes as you go. With every brush stroke, you're gonna be carving and refining the shape. This is how you're gonna turn those blocky looking fingers into cylinders. Now, do not blend anything. If you have two hard contrasting values next to each other, instead of blending them to smooth them out, add a value that's in between them. This will soften the transition, and the more values you lay down between them, the softer the transition. Now, as you're working further into detail and working with smaller and smaller shapes, make sure not to lose the accurate groundwork that you laid out. It's very easy to cut up and working in a small area in a lot of detail, and you end up actually working it so much that you push it out of the value zone that you initially blocked it in. This is why it's important to constantly be stepping back from your painting and taking in the painting as a whole. Now, there are a lot of color shifts in hands. There's some parts you're gonna see are more pink, some are more red, some are more yellow, where the veins are might be some are more blue. Juggling all these different color changes can make it easy to paint something the wrong value. So how do you counteract this? I always recommend having a black and white version of your reference photo up. Now, value is how light or dark something is. So when you're mixing all these different colors, you can check it to make sure it's in the right value zone. Having this black and white reference copy will really help keep you on track. Now, since I'm talking about hands, I should probably talk about skin tones. Now, I've made a whole video on painting skin tones, and if you want to watch that, I'll put a link to that above. Now, I've always said that there's no set recipe or formula for skin tones. Every skin tone is going to be different depending on the color of the skin and the light that it's under. So I can't tell you like mix this color and mix that color and you're going to get the perfect skin tone. But what I can do is help you match a color. If you're having trouble figuring out what color something is, try isolating it first. Now, if you're using a computer or a laptop or your phone, you can easily do this by just cropping in on just that area. And just seeing the color alone can help you match it. And you can take as much time as you need to mix up the paint and check it to match it. I know this sounds very tedious, but the further you get into your painting, the less you're gonna have to do this because you're gonna have more and more accurate colors on your painting to refer to. Now, if you're painting from a hard copy photo reference, you just figure out a way with your hands or a piece of paper to cover up as much of the photo as possible and only see the color you're trying to match. Now, there are no recipes for skin tones, but there are a few colors that I like to have on my palette for mixing skin tones. And those are yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, and titanium white. Now, I will have other colors on my palette. I just find myself going to those colors a lot. All right, so does painting hands sound less tough? Feel more confident? Do you want to go out and paint your hand right now? If so, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. Again, if you want full real-time painting video tutorials, I offer those on my Patreon page, which is linked below. I also have links to all the materials that I suggest for beginners. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button. I also offer you this video and this video. They both will change your life forever. Just pick one. You can't go wrong.